Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Hello and welcome back to Homeschool Together. Thank you for joining us. There's ways to support the podcast down in the show notes below, whether you're listening on YouTube or in your podcast app. Go ahead and click those links and see all the various things. Best way you can support the podcast is share that with another friend. Today is one of those episodes that you might want to point people to if they are new to homeschooling and they're looking to do this maybe in the coming year, or they're starting to do their investigations and looking through curriculum and trying to make choices. We're going to be talking about some of the early years, big box, multi-subject curriculums, kind of that cornerstone of those early years, especially for those new families. That's kind of the first place we tend to push people, or not push, we guide individuals towards if they are first coming into homeschooling. Maybe they don't know what they're doing, don't have a lot of experience. These multi-subject curriculums are a really nice place to go.
Yeah, they are. Just a fair warning, today's podcast is sponsored by caffeine. And as I'm in the middle of Tech Week for a new show, so my voice is a little bit strained. Lots going on there. So apologies if I sound a little tired or spacey.
Late nights, early mornings, Ariel.
Yeah, very, very late nights.
How's that sleeping in goal for the year?
You know what? I've done really good, except for today. I did sleep in because I needed it.
Absolutely.
So, we wanted to do this because these multi-subject curriculums are some of our favorites, but we know that a lot of families don't know about them, or they can feel really overwhelmed about them. I think that there's a lot of goodness there, but there's definitely some gotchas. I mean, basically a multi-subject is going to be exactly what it says, right? It's going to cover more than one thing. So when we talk about all about reading or Right Start Math or something, those are just focused, whereas multi-subjects can be a variety of things. That variety is not usually consistent. Consistently, it will exclude math and reading. Those will be often included in anything that's meant for like pre-K or sometimes kindergarten. You're going to get literacy, you're going to get some reading and math stuff there usually. But then that's where it's typically going to branch out because reading and math skill levels differ so much by, type of child and age and all those. So, the other subjects though included are going to be across the board. Who knows?
But there are some big multi-subject curriculums that tend to go through. We see a lot with charter schools, especially homeschool charters, using some of these like all-in-one, 4-digit dollar figure price tags on the curriculums. We tend to use the digital online ones, but you will have big things like Oak Ridge or Oak Meadow, and where you might drop $1,000 on this curriculum, and it will include everything you need for that entire year. And I think that's sort of when you have those big box curriculums that maybe aren't as a la carte as you would probably want them, where they say, okay, here's fourth grade, because they're anticipating almost like school at home. And so you're taking the fourth grade classroom a lot of times and bringing it into the classroom and saying, here it is. A lot of times people are getting public dollars.
Your charter dollars.
Charter dollars to be able to pay for these curriculums. So they are tailored and heavily controlled based on state standards, state expectations, and where those dollars are allowed to be spent and how they're spent.
Right. Different states have different requirements. Some states are really, they'll let people buy from religious curriculum programs too.
Some states are doing that.
Yeah. And other states, there'll be strict. So your mileage may vary with what your state and your charter dollars will do. But typically one of the nice things about the ones that include all the materials is just that you don't have to source anything yourself. You pay one cost, and you have everything you need for fourth grade. And here you go.
I mean, we're talking workbooks, the actual literature books you might be reading,
manipulatives,
all the things.
We had some friends do Timberdoodle, which is actually neutral, not completely secular, and they had everything. It included like Gravitrax in there, art games, supplies, there was games. It had kind of everything. So it can kind of just really run the stretch between a PDF curriculum like Blossom and Root, which includes no physical anything, and is, of course, much lower cost, and then something like an Oak Meadow that includes everything. So if you got the extra supplies pack that comes with that age. So there can be a wide variety. One of the things to the other subjects, though, is always varied. There's going to be some component of literature. There's going to be some component of science, typically some component of art,
history,
social studies,
history type of thing. Yeah.
But other than that, there's not any real consistency across the board. It's what they've decided to include in their part of their multi-subject.
Well, that's to go back to the consistency thing, is even between various providers of multi-subject curriculum.
Exactly.
They're all delivering different things. They may have different themes. The way it's being delivered, obviously, you said between like a digital curriculum or some boxed curriculum, there's no standard. And so you'll hear the term multi-subject curriculum, and it can span all of those options.
So you got to do your research.
Yeah, you may want to think about, what am I looking for and whatnot. And we'll give you guys some tips and tricks on how to do that. But let's go into...
I think they're great, by the way, for people who have the charter dollars to spend. If I got to spend $1,000 a year on curriculum from my charter school or whatever, I think this is a great option. Yeah. For us, we don't have those dollars. So using a cheaper PDF curriculum and then kind of building it ourselves when we can buy books used and we can decide which pieces we want to use and not use is a lot more friendly for us. So I think these programs can be great for a couple main types of families, those that do have dollars to spend, for the ones that are all included, and those who just don't want the stress of trying to source and trying to figure things out. Everything is included. For the PDF versions, those are great for families too that just really want something kind of spelled out. So that's kind of the main overview of who would kind of benefit most from these. But let's go into some of the pros and cons.
Yeah, and so the first thing, kind of piggybacking on how the thoughtfulness around these curriculums, is a lot of times things are interconnected.
Yeah.
You may have literature selections that back up your history work, which backs up, your social studies work, and you see threads and themes have been drawn through that. I think Blossom and Root does a great job with that. And
Moving Beyond the Page.
Excellent. Another one as well. And they do a really good job at kind of bringing themes all the way through the activities, whether you're doing, if you're an early learner, maybe you're doing some math work, some activity is going to be reflected in the music, which might also be reflected in the literature that you're reading, and then the art selections that you're doing. And they're all kind of thematically integrated. And that's something that would be challenging to do if you're essentially playing Legos and piecing your curriculum together.
Not that it can't be done.
Yeah, not that it can't be done, but having that done already is really, I think, the elegance in some of these curriculums, the thoughtfulness, if they are trying to do some type of method of teaching, whether they're, Charlotte Mason or something like that, they've integrated that for you, and they've already thought through those challenges and those expectations and whatever those might be, and have brought that through the curriculum. I think that's kind of one of the things that you're paying for. Obviously you can just get a curriculum, try to piece it together. It may not have that level of elegance or targeting the certain type of methodology that you want to do within your homeschool.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. The next thing is that they can save you a lot of time because not only are you not having to do that integration, but you're not having to make choices on every piece. Well, what science are we going to do this year? Well, how are we going to do music? What books am I going to choose for literature, right? It's all spelled out for you. And that can be really great, and especially for newer homeschoolers who are not sure, exactly what they should be doing, or, they don't have a style yet. It's like somebody has spelled this all out for you, and it covers multiple subjects. So you're sitting really good.
Well, and, a lot of times you're right that doing all that work is a lot, but also if you are piecing something together, it's hard to think on the timeline of an entire year.
It really can
with
be.
respect to piecing together like a unit study here or unit study here. I find, if I can think, of some type of subject arc over a couple months or maybe a few weeks, but they're trying to think of in terms of 9 months, especially if you're doing kind of like a charter school, homeschool type of thing. They're thinking in terms of the calendar year, 9 months, maybe a year. It's hard for us as homeschool parents to piece together things on that scale,
Right.
on the fly.
Right. It's one thing to do, put together a unit.
If you spend the whole summer, maybe
hey,
you can put something together. But then again, like there's an opportunity cost there that you're lost. Like, do you want to spend all this time hunting down curriculum, threading it through your thing? Now it's great. Like, oh, my son or daughter wants to do, learn Spanish or wants to learn about, rockets or something like that. That's so cool. And that's great. And you can bolt on something and whatnot. But are you going to spend your whole summer designing some elegant 9-month science curriculum that may take you 3 or 4 months to put the books together, to find the activities, to do the planning? There's a little bit of like opportunity cost loss there.
Well, honestly, that's how a lot of these curriculums were born. These PDF versions was
When
that a parent started it for their own children, and it took so much work, and they were like, I should sell this.
Emily Cook is a good example of that with the Build Your Library.
Christina Garner is as well.
Yeah.
With Blossom and Root, they both said that I wanted this type of thing for my child, and I couldn't find it, and so I started to make it. And then I realized other people might like this too, and then that whole thing was born. So it is an incredible amount of work to put together your own a la carte thing. Some people love it, but I think it's great to save time this way, and they're pretty easy to use.
100%.
It's not just here's the resources and it dumps it on you. It's here's the lesson plans that you're supposed to do. Hey, week 1 you do this, and these are the books you read and the activities that you do, and here's the links, and it really outlines it all for you. So
something like Blossom and Root, where Christina says, if you're a book heavy family, do this. If you're a craft heavy family, do this. I don't think I've seen that many suggestions like being given to families. Right. A lot of times there's a couple ideas for you to do, and then you find something thematically that's through the week, and then maybe, you have some interest that you try to chase down. But it's very hard to find a lot of people who give you all those ideas, and it does make things easier to use. And, when there's a lot of ideas given to you, or the curriculum is as rich as it is, that you have that ease of use, but also goes into the idea of flexibility.
Yeah.
Because if you're given a lot of options, you can be flexible not only for life happening in the week, whatever is happening, like you're right now doing the play. So it's really like difficult right now, and we're really, really busy with all the things that are going on. Okay, maybe this week can't be 100% week. Maybe it's got to be a 70% week. Having the flexibility within the curriculum where it's not forcing you so rigidly to do X, Y, or Z, that I can prune a little bit here, and maybe next week we can make up for it, or maybe I can take this week's curriculum and double it and go for 2 weeks. A lot of these curriculums allow you to do that. If you have a really rigid curriculum where it's like we have to do A, B, and C, and you can't do B unless you do A, I almost like it like A is you can scale A, you can scale B and scale B, C, and that type of thing. I would rather prefer to do that because life comes and classes and sports and all the fun things that we're doing. Sometimes we need to scale things. So if someone gets ill or whatnot, maybe we won't do as much this week in our around the world journey, or as much videos for this week in ancient civilizations, or medieval history or whatnot. But we're still going to read the readings. We're still going to do the stuff. I like to have that level of flexibility in what I'm doing. I don't have that much flexibility in my math and my reading, but sometimes with the history and the science and the social studies, maybe you might want to pare things down or do a little bit less for that week.
No, not all multi-subjects are going to give you this kind of flexibility, but some of them definitely do, which is why we kind of wanted to point that out. And Blossom and Root is, I think, kind of the poster child for that. The other thing is really great about multi-subject is they do encourage creativity.
Yeah,
all the ones that I've seen include some component of art, and art is that thing that in our house at least, we tend to, our kids really like it, especially our youngest.
Yes,
and
she really likes it.
She loves it. But, and we do a lot of like ad hoc art, like just, coloring. We do some paper art craft things, but hey, let's randomly paint something. But when we have a curriculum that actually has an art component in it, that's really good for us, because that's kind of the first thing that gets on the chopping block of our week. Yeah. Unfortunately, I I don't like that that's what usually happens, but usually it's like, we didn't get math done. I guess we're missing that art project. And it shouldn't be that way. And I'm so thankful that we use some of these curriculums that make sure that art is included so that we don't leave it behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, going back to thinking about multi-subject curriculums, we're thinking about the holistic view of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
A lot of these are just, they're complete.
And they're well-rounded.
They're well-rounded.
And that's a great way to
like what
put
you're
it.
saying, like with, like they have art, they have a little bit of music, maybe they'll have a little bit of history, social studies. Sometimes they may have a little bit of math, especially if you're getting into the very early years curriculums. They'll try to give you a little bit of everything. Having that kind of complete view, that kind of well-rounded view is something that's really nice that I think we would struggle to do. Like a lot of times with homeschooling, I find it does, as much as we knock the public schools for just doing math and just doing reading, sometimes you do get into that trap. I don't know, maybe we should come up with like a term for it. It's like the math reading trap, where we only want to do that.
Well,
because
those are the ones that have to always get done. And so they always do.
And so the first, they're the last things that get trimmed for the day.
Of course they are. And I think that this holistic look at, whatever year it is that you're doing, and the consistency of the themes within that really helps retention and engagement too with our kids. Because, when we're doing we were doing Build Your Library Zero and stuff. It's like, oh, hey, the art that we're doing is in coordination with the country that we're studying and the food that we're doing. So I was bringing the culinary arts and, the music that we're listening to. If you're doing Torchlight, they've got all these music links. It all links to the country. So it's like I think it was such a richer experience for our kids, and I think they retained a lot more of it than if we were, hopping around to all these different things that didn't feel like they had anything to do with one another.
So that's kind of a list of the pros. Let's get a little bit into the cons of these type of multi-subject curriculums. One of the things that we'll often see is, while they are well-rounded, they try to do everything. Sometimes those things are done very shallow.
Right.
And I'm not saying they're at fault at that. I mean, I think that's true about a lot of things. Maybe even in the regular schools, they're only going to touch science for maybe a half a class a week or something like that, or maybe an hour a week. And that's very shallow. And I would deem that to be shallow. And we may see, gaps in these curriculums, and that's kind of where the homeschooling flexibility kind of comes into, where we can bolt things on and whatnot. So sometimes,
or go deeper,
because you may have an interest within your family that requires you to go deeper because that's something you guys are interested in. And as we always know, we want to chase interest because therein lies learning. And sometimes that has to be put onto the curriculum and bolted on. We always talk about bolting on things, hacking things and changing things so they work. We can never,
I've recently started 3D printing, and they call everything remixes. Yeah. And I feel like that's what we just keep doing, keep remixing as curriculum. One of the things about subject depth that I think is important to realize with these is that, as you're saying, that they are, in many cases, they can be shallower. What I think the biggest con for me is that they're inconsistent in their depth. So you're going to get some curricula that are really deep in literature.
Build your library.
Right. They're going to go really deep in there, but they're going to barely scratch science. Right. So it's different levels, different years. Blossom and Root, for example, is going to be really comprehensive with science. So, you just kind of have to weigh where your family's interests are, where your interests are, and what you feel comfortable, as you say, bolting on or enhancing. So maybe it's like, oh, we're cool if it kind of does light science because we totally can add more science. We're fine with that. Or no, I want it to be heavy in literature because I don't feel comfortable picking more books or getting more into that. You have to see, but that's, I think, one of the big cons is that because there's no standard for what's included, and they're trying to cover these different subjects, the depth is variable.
Absolutely. And there requires a little bit of maturity there when you are thinking about removing something from a curriculum and then putting your own thing in. There takes a little bit of guts and maybe a little bit of experience to be able to do that, feel comfortable enough doing that, because am I doing the right thing? Am I doing enough? All that type of things. Yeah. And we don't want to then create gaps. Sometimes these curriculums have gaps where they remove an entire thing and say, well, this is what we're doing, but we don't do math. So it's like, we'll do everything, except math.
Right. And others of them, there's going to be other pieces that you are expecting to see in there. I'm expecting to see history. Well, this doesn't have a history component this year. It's doing some other kind of social studies, but there's not actually history, like it's doing a geography, for example. So, I mean, it's going to be... No two are created equal, so you're going to have to just look through them. The other thing about multi-subject curriculums is that they can tend to be expensive if they're the kind that are assembling all the resources for you. You are paying for the convenience of the fact that they have assembled and printed, and they will ship it to you in a box. And there's a cost for that convenience that can make it, untenable for all kinds of homeschooling families who don't have like charter dollars. Now, some families might say, by the time you buy 5 different curriculums and all the books that go with them,
about $1,000.
You could have just bought this other thing. So, your mileage may vary with that one. But
even our parent partnership has an entire class called School to Go, and this is very often, I think, newer parents tend to take advantage of this, and they will go and give you all 7, 10 curriculum requirements.
Yep.
For the state of Washington, and they will they'll feed you as much as you want. So if your kid is moving forward, it's kind of like the way they design it, I think is very good because it allows you to go as fast as you want, but it's an all-in-one. And if you start looking at all the things they're giving you,
right,
you're like, oh, wow, you're right. That could add up to a couple $100 of materials and stuff.
It's a pieced together version. And I guess I didn't write this in my notes, but I think we should talk about this, that there are different styles of multi-subject. You can get one like Oak Meadow, for example, which is going to be, everything is included from that one company. And then you could get something like what you're talking about, School to Go, or a neutral option like Timberdoodle, where they have curated a selection of curriculum that they're going to give to you in a box that is all going to make kind of one multi-subject package and give you multi-subject scope and sequence. But they're doing it with a bunch of different products. So there's kind of 2 flavors there to keep in mind.
Yeah, and you can even see some of the boxed curriculums where they're getting you everything. They are doing that. They are piecing together like 3 or 4 different curriculums, and maybe they haven't woven any threads or themes through it. You're just getting a math curriculum, you're getting a reading curriculum, and you're getting a writing curriculum, and you're getting a science curriculum.
I'd kind of
and
like
here's
to
all your
do that
literature
someday.
books. Yeah.
I think that would be really cool because
Curate your own,
curate our own homeschool together ones, because there's no... like I said, Timberdoodle's neutral, and so it would be really great for a truly secular one to pop up someday. We would love to see somebody pop that up.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That would be cool.
The next thing would be the grade level limitations. A lot of times, these all-in-one curriculums do wrap around an expected age range, and they don't take into account the ability to accelerate or decelerate if needed.
Our daughter's like 2 levels ahead in math, and she's on grade level in reading.
But
and
that may be one of the reasons, and it's probably the number one reason why a lot of these curriculums, these multi-subject curriculums, de-scope from their curriculum math or reading.
Right, they're the 2 most fluctuated.
Yeah.
You can't see Matt. He's doing the kind of up and down thing with his arms.
Dracula arms here.
Right, yeah. Frankenstein arms.
Fire homeschool.
Yeah. So, you're right. And so you are kind of locked into a certain age, which is hard, especially if you have a family.
Thank you. Yeah, that was
and you want to do something together. So one of the things that we do like about Blossom and Root or whatever, a PDF curriculum, is that because we didn't pay as much for it, we feel a little bit better having to adjust it. And especially Blossom and Root's got all these like rabbit trails and stuff you can go down with all kinds of different activities that are easier to adapt up and down, and you could do it with multiple children. Whereas if you go with another type of curriculum that's kind of all boxed, it's all meant for 4th grade, you might have a really hard time doing some of that with a 2nd grader or a 6th grader also. We know a lot of homeschool families would like to retain their sanity and try to do subjects where they can, where it makes sense, do them all together. I mean, we like to. Of course, we don't do reading and math together, but the others we try to, because where would we find the time to do 2 complete different curriculums?
At the speed my little one's learning to read, we might be at the same level of curriculum. Next one would be a lack of customization. Sometimes, not all of them, but sometimes these curriculums may not be very adaptable and pulling things out.
And then you spent a lot on it, and so you're like, well, if I toss half these books, what was the point spending $400 on this?
You buy Oak Meadows, great. you buy 12 literature books as part of the
It all comes together.
and you're like halfway through the book and your kid can't stand it.
Right.
They can't stand it. But the workbook and the work pages pertain to the book.
Right.
And you have themes and, reports or papers or
Yeah.
writing you have to do that
Yeah.
pertain to that book.
Moving
And
beyond the page is the same.
what do you do at that point, right? So
Right.
yes, you can descope it and remove it. Do you then add in another book and maybe try to write your own stuff following the same format? Sure. But again, opportunity cost, lots of time, effort, and that type of things.
That's true.
Do you want to be in a curriculum that's multi-subject that is that rigid in the sense that the materials pertain to these things and you can't really descope them? There's a little bit of challenge there, and that's something you should keep in mind when you are thinking about homeschooling with multi-subject curriculums, because a lot of times we are trying to do homeschooling so that we are not school at home, and then also our learners have specific needs. And those needs may not be met by these type, if you choose a multi-subject curriculum, you got to make sure it's meeting the needs. Some of the fear there, which kind of goes back to the previous one, is the cost. Great. I'm going to use this big box curriculum. It's $1,000. And you get a month in and you're like, your kid hates it.
Right.
And you guys are fighting and they just put their heads down, and threatening timeouts don't work no more. Whatever it might be.
What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? And you just blew a bunch of money on it. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh, am I failing at homeschooling? Right. So there's a lot of concern around that. And you want to make sure you're making good decisions that can adapt and change and be flexible enough, especially when you're first starting out, that you can get your sea legs. You can figure out how to do this stuff, figure out what your kids like the most, and then maybe start branching out and doing the things that work best for them, and then enjoying that process and having a lot of success. Going straight into a very specific curriculum that is very rigid, might work good for some people.
Well, so that's funny, because the next point on our cons list was that these can be overwhelming for newcomers.
Exactly.
And I think it's funny because they can both be a great thing for new homeschoolers and a tough thing. Most of the families, like you said, at our school that choose School to Go, a lot of them are newer homeschool families because they don't have to choose. They don't have to choose which programs they're going to pick. It's all taken care of. It's all in the box. It's all laid out for them. It's open and go. It's like a recipe, and they just follow it. And because they don't have strong opinions yet about what their kids' learning styles are and all, they're just trying to get their feet wet. They're like, this is the easiest thing. I can just buy this, and it's all set up.
Or if the parent says, you know what, I need to homeschool. We need to do this, but I'm not really an educator. I'm not really good. My kid's kind of a go with the flow, self-starter, can do the work, but I'm not really a sit down and teach you the ins and outs of long division. That's not my jam. And maybe a box curriculum where they're following along is a great thing for them, right? They can get all their work done and
maybe
move on.
you just open it up and it's great. But I think these can, while it could be awesome for newcomers, could also be really overwhelming for them. How many families have I heard of that picked up Torchlight and were like, I don't know where to start. There's so much here. Every week has got all these different, there's a checklist and then there's a weekly plan.
Do I do everything?
Yeah. So there can be a lot there as well. So some families are going to feel more comfortable just taking, we usually recommend to families to start taking like one curriculum at a time. Hey, choose a math. Get started with that. See how that's going. Then choose a reading, and instead of trying to like do all these things at once, because then you have all of this different stuff going on. So
what was it? The New Year's resolution starting homeschooling. It's like where everything is starting on January 1st.
Oh yeah, never do.
We
that.
got our math curriculum.
Don't ever start everything on the same day. Just take our advice, please. You listen to nothing else. Do not start every single new curriculum on the same day.
Yeah.
Just like ease in. So yeah, some of the programs that are multi-subject are laid out and presented in a way that's very user-friendly, and it really walks people through, and they just kind of, use it like a really easy recipe. But others can be really complex. I think talking about this like a recipe is the perfect way to say it, because you've read those cookbooks that are super easy to understand. You just follow along. I'm looking at you, Pioneer Woman. They're just like, they're right there. And then you've read those really crazy complex cookbooks that you're like, I don't even know what they said. I can't even follow that recipe. That's the same range we have here. So, some of these multi-subjects are put together in such a way that they're just really easy to open and go, and they tell you exactly what you need to do and when. And others of them have so many moving pieces and parts that it can be very overwhelming. This is a place where YouTube videos are really going to help you out, and you can get a sense of what you're looking at. And whenever we review curriculum on our channel, we give you a complete walkthrough of a week, or if it's a specific individual curriculum, just a lesson. But if it's a multi-subject, we show you a whole week. Like, this is what you would do in a week, and this is all the steps, so that you can kind of understand. And I think that's the best way you can get a good feel for whether or not this is going to be overwhelming for you or not, because they certainly can be.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about the factors. So you're out there, you're thinking about doing a multi-subject curriculum. Let's think about, where do I start? First thing we want to think about is, what is this? Who is this for? Well, this is for the child. So we want to think about what learning style is needed for your children, what works best for them, what has been their experiences in the past. Are you coming from a different type of situation and trying something new? Has there been some expression from your student? It doesn't have to be like a first grader. It could be a 6th or 7th grader, and say, Mom, I really like doing math on the computer. I like reading books on the computer, and I like doing these other things. And maybe you're trying to figure out, okay, how can I piece together or find a curriculum that supports my learner where they are and with what they need. I think that's probably the first thing we want to think about, is like, let's think about what the child needs. Next thing is like, well, what are kind of like your home, your homeschool goals for your family? How does this align with your philosophy? Do you want to do school at home? Do you want to do more unschooly? Are you a Charlotte Mason family, a Montessori type of homeschool? What are you looking for? Again, that kind of keys in on, I think, on the first point with what your child needs, but also as a family, you also have expectations. How much time do we want to be spending on these things? How much rigor is necessary? Do I have a child that doesn't work well with assessments or heavy rigor? Do they want to be more exploratory? Are they more emotional? Do they need to, do I need to chunk up this curriculum a little bit differently? Think about how the curriculum is being delivered, and does that meet specifically with what your family needs? Obviously, the next one is budget. Money is always a big thing. We are paying for the public schools, and then in a lot of respects now we are not using the public schools, and now we have to shell out additional money for our homeschool. I know it is very much, we very often want to give the most to our children. We're already sacrificing, for example, in our household, I'm not working in order to educate our children. We're already sacrificing a lot. I want to make sure they have all the materials that they need, every manipulative that I want, every workbook we can ever do to make them as successful as possible. That does begin to add up. If you're more of a price-conscious family, maybe thinking about curriculums that use the library a lot, thinking about math curriculum that maybe you can obtain through the library system, math curriculum that we can get at our parent partnership that helps save some costs for us, finding ways that maybe you can join co-ops, meet up with other homeschool families. Think about, is this something that I can work with other people or work with other resources in order to get the things I need without spending as much money.
Right. And does it come with all the equipment that you need? Yeah. Is it a system where you're buying all of the books and everything and it's expensive, but then you also need all these manipulatives you have to go out and source yourself? Or, I'm buying a PDF and this means I'm going to have to go source all the books. That's a joke some people make, is you spend, $45 on the PDF and then $300 on books. Yeah. So,
if only. Yeah.
Right. So sometimes what I like to do is really go through and price out the books beforehand. My favorite, we have a great episode that Matt will link in the show notes called Buy All the Books, where we talk about our favorite ways to buy books. Obviously, if you can get them at the library, that's awesome, but that's not feasible for every type of book, depending on how often you reference it and depending on if it's a book your library doesn't have, so then that doesn't work out either. So I love to go on Bookfinder. The short answer is I like to find the ISBN, go on Bookfinder, and do that search, and then you can find out like how much are these books going to cost me, because don't just think, oh great, $30. Wow, that's a great cost for a full year of second grade. Awesome. And then you find out, oh wow, my library has none of these books. This isn't going to work out well. This is going to be expensive. So
$500 in spines later.
Right. Or I need to buy all these supplies, crazy supplies ideas for these art projects that I loved when I looked at the sequence and scope it was going to do. I was like, oh man, I love the idea of all these. And then you're like, oh wait, one of them that I saw one time, I had to like go out and buy copper telephone wire or something. It was like something really crazy that I was like, I don't have that just lying around.
And it was some like silly art project. It wasn't even anything super fancy.
No, it was. And so just be aware of what other hidden costs there might be in a curriculum that covers lots of subjects, because it might be more than books. It could be other supplies and things.
Absolutely. And then beyond that is teaching style. Like, how much time do you want to do? Does your learner work well with direct education one-on-one? Or are they more of an exploratory learner? Do they like to do things by themselves? Do they need a heavy guiding hand?
Right. Do you have time to sit and do lots of one-on-one with them?
Do you have 3 or 4 kids who all need that level of touch?
Right.
That can be a challenge. That could be really like today. Today I did pretty good, Harold. I did the what was it? The homeschool 2-step tango between the 2 girls. I had one girl doing one thing, and then I definitely moved from one to the other, and I have to separate them, so they're in like both kitchen tables. They're one is one is the other, and I'm moving between one. I'm coming over to this one. It was artful today.
You were in peak form.
I have to say I was in peak form today. I was even finishing up homeschool on the stairs today. I had my A game today.
It was very good. But it's true. Looking at your teaching style and also looking at the breadth that you have to teach. Some of these are adaptable to multi-ages and others are not. So be really aware and look at the reviews. Sometimes a curriculum will say it's meant for a certain age range, and then you start to look up, what people have said about it. It's like, actually.
There's a lot of Facebook groups too for all these curriculums. So maybe before you purchase, maybe best practices to go out there to those Facebook groups or wherever the social media is. Maybe they have a forum or something and ask these questions.
Right. Look if somebody else has done the same age range that you have in your household, and did it work with this? What adaptations did they make?
Search the Facebook group first before you ask the question, because somebody might say, well, this question's asked every week.
Right. And there are some like that, but I just know that the published age ranges are not always totally accurate. So, do your own research, and then look at the subject coverage and make sure that however many subjects you need to cover in your state or that you want to cover with your kids, that this is going to fulfill that. And if it's not, what's going to be the additional cost to add on other options that are going to get you those subjects. So,
and then finally, the support options. I think understanding what type of help you're going to get, updates to curriculums. A lot of times you may buy a digital curriculum and they may push out an update while you're doing it, or you buy it the year before and now it's the year you're doing it, and then there's an update. Do you get the update as well?
Right. Blossom and Root and Build Your Library are both great about providing those updates when they update.
Especially if you're going multiple years. So we did it with our oldest, and then now we are doing the same curriculum like 3 years later. Yeah. We've gotten the updates, we get them, and then we get to go ahead and run with the new updates. So think about it, like what support you're going to get. I don't think with the big box curriculums, you're going to get too much support there because they're going to deliver everything.
Right. Everything is physical. Yeah. So they can't do those kind of updates. But is there support if you run into challenges? Do they have very active Facebook groups? That's one of the best places that you can get support from other families that are actively using the curriculum, because the curriculum creators they're busy and they don't have time to answer kind of individual questions a lot of the time. So if there's forums or I know like Torchlight's a good example of, they have these member spaces on the Torchlight website where members have uploaded other helpful materials. So they've uploaded extra cross-referenced guides for other books to add in, or
that's really nice.
I mean, just all kinds of extra materials that support whatever the level that is. So be aware of what options you have if you are struggling with something, or if you need to make an adaptation, or have questions. What are your options?
Absolutely.
So I think that really covers multi-subject curriculums. We just wanted to give you a highlight. I know a lot of you use them, but
we use them. Yep.
We use them. But if you're a new homeschooler and you're just doing your research and you're like, I don't know, should I do 5 different ones or should I do one of these? These are just some factors to consider. So hopefully this will help you in your decision-making curriculum and decision-making
For curriculum.
For curriculum. Thank you. My brain's not working. And if you have a favorite multi-subject, hit us up on the Facebook group and, let us know what your favorites are and why you chose them. I'm very curious. We're always curious to learn about new options that we haven't heard about before.
It's almost invariably you end up talking to some homeschoolers and you think, oh, everyone does Blossom and Root. And then you talk to 50 different homeschoolers, maybe one other person is doing that.
There's other options
so many
out there.
options out there, yeah.
Especially with so many new things coming up that are digital too. There's just a lot coming on the scene. So let us know what you use and what you love. Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
Happy homeschooling!